Hey, what's up guys? So today I'm actually going to be starting to remove my power steering rack out of the Viper ACR 2000. Basically when I took it to autocross last time, when I came back, everything was fine at autocross, but when I came back and parked the car in the garage, went to take it out the next weekend, and there was quite a bit of oil underneath the rack, underneath the driver's side by the boot. So basically the seal on the end of the rack on the driver's side, underneath that boot there, that dust boot, that's leaking there. So I've changed almost every other rubber component on the car, if you guys have been following along. So changed out every single bushing, all that kind of stuff. So not a surprise that obviously the seals in the rack at this point are dried out or whatnot, or deteriorated from the age of the car. So I'm gonna go ahead and jack this up. We're gonna pull out that rack. I'm gonna probably end up shipping it off, so it's probably gonna take about a week or two for it to get repaired. And then once it comes back, we'll toss it back in, send it for an alignment. I'm probably just gonna need a toe alignment, and then it'll be back up and running. So without further ado, let's jack up that car and pull out that rack. Okay, first things first, I'm gonna remove the airbox, because that way I can easily access those bolts that hold on the rack from the top. So we'll remove those first we'll remove the airbox so we can get at those, and then also there's some of these hoses here, and then this is the shaft that runs to the steering column here. So we're gonna have to get our hands in there and loosen those bolts as well, and those two lines that are on the top of the rack there. So let's get this airbox out of the way and keep going. Okay, so this next step is optional, but I have my evac here, and basically just to reduce the mess that I'm going to make, I'm going to take this cap off, and I'm going to suck out any remnants that are left there. I just place my cap off to the side here so it doesn't roll away. But I'm going to suck out whatever remaining fluid is in here. It was a little bit low, obviously, because it was dripping, but I'm just going to suck out what's in this reservoir. If you guys haven't used one of these, this thing's awesome. Basically just give it a few pumps and it just sucks out anything. So I mean, I guess the fluid is not too bad colored. It's still a little bit golden, but either way, the seals decided to give up. So we'll suck this down. In the meantime, so the airbox is removed, obviously. This is the power steering cooler, and it has a line that attaches to the rack. So we're gonna have to undo that basically nut there that's holding that on, that fastener. And then we have the other one. This hose goes to the bottle, or not to the bottle, but to the power steering pump. So it wraps around here, goes around, and then you can see it right there on the rack. So I'll have to remove those two, and other than that, it looks like it's just tie rods, and then those two massive bolts that you guys might have remembered from the video where I did the bushings on those. So I'm gonna remove those two, and then the rack should hopefully be free. I'm hoping I don't have to take out too much more to make room. I don't see that I have to. Worst comes to worst, I think we should be okay. I'm not gonna jinx it right now, but I mean, this cross brace could come out if I had to make more room, but we'll see what happens. So let's do that, and then also those nuts down there to remove the input from the steering column. Okay, so I crafted this basically banjo here, whatever you want to call it, so that I can remove this line. So here's this one, pull this line out. Of course it's going to puke everywhere, so I'm going to get a pan under there. Okay, so that line is out. Okay, next is to remove the other line that's next to it, coming from the cooler. So use whatever assortment of wrenches. I didn't actually have to use a pipe wrench. I managed just to use a regular wrench to crack these loose, so I was prepared to go get some pipe wrenches because I don't have any here, but they didn't seem to be too ridiculously tight or anything, so yeah, I got away with it having to, so that's kind of nice. Okay, so those two lines are out. Now I'm going to see about removing this steering shaft here on the input, and then we'll work on the other parts. Okay, so this bolt here is a 13 mil, so we'll loosen and remove this one. Alright, so as the age-old saying goes, there's a million different ways to skin a cat, but this is the way that I'm using. So basically, there's another 13mm bolt up here, and then the steering column or shaft, whatever you want to call this portion of it, basically slides into here. So you remove this 13mm bolt completely, you remove the other 13mm bolt, which hopefully you guys can see down there from the portion that we looked at earlier from the lower half. And it's a little bit stubborn to try and just sit there and use your hands to work it off. So basically I took two flathead screwdrivers and just kind of tapped them in there gently, nothing too crazy, nothing abusive or damaging, but basically just to kind of spread them out a little bit. So basically I have that there, and then just a few taps of the hammer here like so. This shaft is coming off. So this is pretty much off now. A few more wiggles, but yeah, basically you just work it off. I can only do so much with the camera and two hands here, but basically you just work it off and it slides up and we're pretty much off. So let's complete that. Let me put this down and we'll get this off. Okay, so it is now off. Hopefully you guys can see that way down there. It is off. Literally it was just an extra little wiggle and then it fell off as soon as I turned the camera off here, but that's off. Now basically the only thing holding this in place is those two big bolts, and I do have to remove my tie rods. So let's get these tie rods off first, and then we can work on those two bolts, and hopefully this thing slides out without too much hassle. Oh, and then just for the record, since I'm already down here, so this is all the basically oil you can see. These were perfectly clean before, because I had all these controllers out and I cleaned them all. And, even freshened them up, actually touched them up with that silver paint. So this is all just grease, just from, or not grease, but actually oil, just from leaking out of this boot here. So let's keep going. We'll get these tie rods out and off, and then we'll see where we're at. Alright, so let's remove these cotter pins. And I'm most likely going to be replacing these ball joints because it's not the friendliest on the boot, I'll tell you that much. At least this one isn't. Okay, so if we're lucky, it won't be ripped, but we'll find out. Okay, so you just tighten this. Wait for the big bang. And then she's off. Alright, so I cracked this nut loose. There wasn't really enough room for my hands and the camera in here at once, but basically it's nothing, not rocket science, just loosen this nut. And then now I can take off the end of this castle nut. And that is free on this end. So let's go to the other side and we'll do the same thing. So all the same nonsense on this side. We're going to remove the cotter pin, loosen the castle nut, put that tool on here. I think eventually I'm either going to modify that tool so it doesn't rip the boot, but right now I'm not too worried about it. These tie rods are old, so I might replace them, or might do it at a later date. But anyways, let's not worry about that. So we're going to use that tool, pop that out, and then we'll also crack this nut loose, and then should just be those two bolts. So let's do this in warp speed time. Alright, so both tie rod ends are disconnected. And now we can move on to these two bolts, and then we'll see what we're dealing with as far as pulling this thing out of here, if it's a nightmare or if it's going to slide out. Alright, so here we are with these two bolts. I already cracked them loose. Alright, so the rack is free, and it looks like it wants to come out fairly easily out the driver's side. So let's continue to take it out this way. See if it fights us. Alright, so the rack has made it out of the car. Was pretty easy to get out, wasn't really a fight or anything like that. So this is it. underneath here is the culprit. You can see it's been wet for a little bit. So just to clarify, when I originally bought the car, this side was always a tiny bit wet. But when I pushed it on autocross, obviously, and it was 110 degrees out, so probably that didn't help matters with the oil being thinner and whatnot. But yeah, basically, and I mean, just all the steering movements on autocross is pretty vigorous, so the steering rack probably got pretty hot too, so that's when it decided to leak the most. But basically what I'm going to do is just measure my tie rod ends right now and see where they're at. So I'm going to take some measurements, write those down, record them, and then I'm going to remove these tie rod ends because I'm shipping it without them. So I'm going to remove those, and that way when I put it back together, or when I get the rack back, I can assemble it, and at least my alignment will be close enough to drive over to the alignment shop to get them to set the toe on it again. So that should be it for now. So let's send this thing off. Alright, so since you guys know I'm a curious person, basically I popped off this rubber boot just to see what's going on inside, just to confirm everything. I basically already diagnosed it on the car, but just wanted to take it off since it's coming off anyways. But this inner tie rod on my car has already had a tiny bit of play, so I noticed that when I got the alignment. We kind of looked at it with the tech guy. But yeah, it feels a little bit gritty on this inner tie rod joint. But basically you can see kind of this thing's been puking. There's all sorts of oil in there. If you look inside here, I don't know why you guys can see that, but basically this thing is just full of oil inside here too. So I think you guys can probably see it all dripping out there. So yeah, original diagnosis was correct, and let's send it off and get the seal that's inside there replaced, and then we'll keep going. One small tip, if you guys end up using that rack doctor or any rebuilding service, is try to ask them if they cannot recoat it, because I didn't ask for that, and when I got it back it was covered in this horrible crappy gray finish. So right now I'm actually just using paint remover, taking it off, so I'm back to the factory look, because it was this terrible, just 2-second almost rattle can job on the rack. So just removing that, just using some paint remover stripper. So just got all the rubber components covered up, just letting that shit bubble, and then we'll remove the actual crappy coating they put on there and be back to new. Alright, so the rack is all cleaned off. Here it is in its original looking condition. I think it's a lot better than that bullshit coating that they threw on there. So got it back looking good again. And then I got the Moog tie rod ends. So like I said, I was going to replace those. So got these. Here they are. Basically you just have to assemble and put on the grease nipple. And they also give you a new nut to put on here, the lock nut. So I'm going to go ahead and assemble these, throw these on. I'm not sure what measuring method you guys want to use or would use, but basically I just went from a solid point, so I went to the end of these knurls to the grease nipple, and that's where I measured the old ones. So again, the end of the knurls to the grease nipple, which is the center of the joint. So I'm going to do that similar, and then obviously get an alignment after this, but this should get me close at least. So let's go ahead and throw those on, and then we can throw this rack in. Okay, so the rack's assembled. It took me a little bit to get everything measured. I checked it a million times just to make sure. So 2 brand new tie rod ends are installed, tightens, we're good to go. So let's get this rack installed. And you're gonna wanna install it through the driver's side. So slide it up through the driver's side. Okay, so the rack's in place. Now you just gotta put in your bushings. If you have the IPSC-O bushings like mine, the aluminum ones, they basically just fall out when you take the rack out. But if you have the original pressed-in ones, the rubber ones, they'll probably still be in there. But anyways, you're gonna wanna put in your bushings if they're removed, and you're gonna wanna make sure the shim stacks on both sides are the same, and then install these 2 bolts. So let's go ahead and do that. After you're done fiddling around with the shims on the bottom, getting those all aligned and positioned, you're obviously going to tighten these top 2 bolts. If you want more information on how those shims stack up and how those all look and how they looked on my car, I'll put a link to a video at the end of this video where I basically, when I change out those 2 bushings, the IPSCO steering rack bushings, and I went more in depth on basically uninstalling and reinstalling those and where all the shims went and whatnot. So tighten those, and then after that I'm going to install my outer tie rods into the spindle here, or hub assembly. So I'm going to throw those on. Super simple, but I'm just going to do that now and get it out of the way. Okay, so you're going to tighten the other tie rod end. Obviously that one's not very hard. Next thing I want to show you guys is the lines. So the lines here, this is your high pressure one and this is the return. So I just brought them up here so you guys can actually see this a little bit better. So this is an O-ring that I replaced. So you can see that O-ring looks decent. This is what it looked like in the condition that I removed it in. So basically the O-ring gets like crunched into this tapered look, and it's hard and brittle. And even the old O-ring, if I can find it laying around here somewhere, it basically looked brutal. So it didn't even look like a O-ring, and I don't know if you guys can see this, but basically it was all kind of distorted and thin and barely even sealing. There was even one point on it where I'm not sure how it held through, which is right there. It looked all kind of melted. So definitely want to replace those. They were cheap. I just went to Napa and just grabbed a couple, so no big deal. So make sure you replace those before you go through the hassle of putting that on and having it leak. So those are one thing, and then let's go ahead and attach the steering column to the actual rack first. Let's do that now, and then we'll worry about the lines. Okay, so on the actual steering column itself, you'll see that flat index here on the back portion, right where my finger is. So there's actual flat portion that matches up with the input shaft, so it makes it pretty easy to slide on. So line those up and slide it on. And install your bolt. Alright, next is to tighten this bolt on the upper part of the steering column. Once you're done tightening down that bolt on the steering column shaft, you're going to go down to those lines. So I just went ahead and did them. They weren't too hard to do. But these 2 lines here, this being your high pressure line, and then the other one, the return line. I found putting on this return line, putting that one on first, just because you have this big kind of, I don't know the technical term for this, but this thing is in the way. I'm trying to get a wrench on there, so I put this one on first, and then I went ahead and put on this one second. So I would do it in that sequence and just snug them down. They don't have to be crazy tight, but obviously not enough to come loose. But they have obviously that O-ring that I was showing you on there. After that, you're going to throw your cooler on, power steering cooler, tighten that down, and now we're pretty much ready to put fluid in it. So I'll show you guys what fluid I'm using. So this showed up here. I actually went ahead and bought this fluid that most of the Corvette guys are bragging about since they have a bunch of power steering issues, but it's Joe Gibbs brand. Basically, a lot of people are saying this stuff's pretty good. It's either this or people are running Redline. So you don't want to run any power steering fluid that has any sort of anti-leak or stop leak or any of that shit in it. So this one was the Joe Gibbs one. People said this was really good, specifically for track. It's just a synthetic, and basically it says it's for high temperature and stuff like that. It's known to basically keep the temperatures down and actually not break down when you're beating the shit out of your car. So I got this stuff. Like I said, a lot of people are running this or the Redline stuff, but Redline, that one you don't get as much for your money, and people are saying this one's good, so try this one, see how that works. But don't run ATF, like automatic transmission fluid in it. A lot of guys are getting confused with the 2003 Plus on running automatic transmission fluid in these. You do not want that. You want just either a mineral oil with no additives or go synthetic like I'm doing here. So let's go ahead and get some of that stuff in there, and should be able to fire it up and start purging it and adding more fluid. Alright, so I read somewhere that I guess the capacity of that system was about 2-3 liters you would need, or quarts. But my rack was already pre-filled because they do some testing, I guess, before they shipped it out. So I used about 1 quart, and it seemed to bring it up to level, and drove around for a bit, still up to level. So obviously the rack had some in it. So I can't give you guys exact capacity on that at this point, but everything seems to be working okay. But I'll keep you guys posted and updated, and also how that fluid's working out. Any questions, just put it in the comments below and I'll be sure to answer them. But stay tuned, there's gonna be lots more coming. So I hope you guys liked this video. If you did, give it a thumbs up and subscribe, and we'll see you on the next one. Take care.
What we do here is go back.
Loud.